Hello, everyone, and welcome to the session about I am an experienced technical writer and want to pick API documentation. Do I need to know coding? So, this question has been popping in a lot of forums, and although people have tried to answer this and given out some good information in the responses, I thought a comprehensive response to this question was in order. I had a few thoughts in my mind what a technical writer might want to know and ought to know when they are asking, do I need to know coding for API documentation? So let's dive right into it. So first of all, the question can be better phrased when a technical writer is trying to ask, I am an experienced technical writer and want to enter API documentation. Do I need to know how to write code? What they are really asking is, do they need to know how to write code for doing REST API documentation? Why? Because mostly it is the REST API documentation that we see as a requirement in the job openings. And it is highly in demand. A lot of companies require REST API documentation. Basically, every company that is into the cloud business, that is using cloud to deliver their software, their functionality, their information, they need REST APIs documentation. So REST APIs is a way to monetize the cloud. If you see any cloud company, they would have REST APIs, and REST APIs are a medium of choice, although there are other mediums to share your cloud functionality with others. But REST APIs happens to be the most popular. More information about this can be found in my blog post, REST API docs. Should I know about them? So again, the question really is, to enter REST API documentation, to be able to do REST API documentation, do I need to know how to write code? Uh, do I need to know how to write code for API documentation is an entirely different question. So what is the difference? API docs, REST API docs. So in this context, when a technical writer asks this question, the main difference is the API docs are programming language specific, for which, of course, you need to know coding. API docs would be specific to a particular programming language or multiple programming languages. And when you talk about REST API docs, REST APIs are not programming language specific. So fundamentally, you don't need to know coding, but we'll be talking more about this. Let's see a couple of examples of API docs and REST API docs to be absolutely clear what these are like. First of all, we are all familiar, most of us are familiar with Oxygen. We would have used it for writing content, mostly in data. So if we look at Oxygen API docs, the SDK of Oxygen is created in Java. And to be able to work with this, the programmer would need to know Java. And hence, to document how to work with the Oxygen SDK, to extend the Oxygen functionality, you need to know Java. Even the technical writer would need to know Java, but this is the API doc. What kind of extension or what kind of development will be done using the Oxygen API? Usually to support something in the UI, to support some functionality, to be able to have additional options in the UI, stuff like this. And then there is MadCap Player. Again, most of us have worked with MadCap Player, and that has a plugins API. And the MadCap Player plugins API seems to be written in C#, although I'm not sure because it requires Visual Studio and yeah, it requires .NET framework. So I'm guessing this is C#. It could also be Visual Basic, and of course, you would need to know C# to write the API docs for the MadCap Player plugins API. Third is a Python API, a transpose function in the Pandas library. So what are libraries? Libraries are basically something that provide you functionality in addition to the default functionality of Python or any other language. For example, Pandas library lets you process big data sets in Excel, CSV, stuff like this. So there is a transpose function in the Pandas library that we can use. By using it, we don't have to write our own code. We can just use this function. We can import the library, use this function, and we can, with one line of code, we can change the rows to columns and columns to rows in an Excel sheet or CSV. And of course, since it's a Python library, we need to know Python to document it. We need to know Python to use. Now let's have a REST API docs example. My favorite REST API docs example happens to be the Google Directions REST API and its docs. You can read the documentation and see that it doesn't mention any coding anywhere. We'll also use this API in Postman to see what it's like to use it in Postman. And here is the Directions API of Google, basically for finding directions. If we were to use this Google functionality without the API, we can go to maps.google.com and we can find directions from Pune to Bangalore, from Pune to Bangalore. And in this, the travel mode is transit. So these are the driving directions. Now, if I have to I have to use a REST API to make the same call. It will be like this. This is the Google Directions API. I send a request from Pune to, this is my API key, which I'll be changing after this session because my credit card is attached to it. And that's how Google will charge me for this. This is how they monetize their REST APIs. And the use case you can think of is Uber. Uber uses Google Directions API in their app. And of course, they use a payment gateway. And they use it to calculate the fare, the way for your journey. So when I make this call, I want the driving directions from Pune to Bengaluru, and I get it in JSON. I can also get it in XML if I want. And the coding bit, if I want to embed it in my code, so typically a partner programmer will be making these calls and they will be embedding it in their code. They can just select the type of code they want to generate. For example, we have Python request code here and Python HTTP client. These are two different kind of libraries that can help us make these requests. So in the Python request API, this will be the code. As you see, we didn't have to write this. We got this automatically, and we can give this to the, we can write this, we can have this example sample in our REST API documentation. I didn't have to write the code, but I do have to understand what really is happening here. This part is JSON or XML. It doesn't involve any coding. It is key value pairs. We can easily manipulate them in the URL or in the query params. And for making this query, this would be the request code in Python request library. So we can embed this so that if you were a technical writer at Google, you would embed this code and give it as a sample to a Python programmer who could embed this in their app code and get the direction between uh, to between the origin and destination, and use a security key. And this security key will ensure you keep a tab on the request they are making and you charge them according to that, because getting started with this directions API involves attaching your credit card to a security key. Yeah, this is how Google will monetize. This is the whole business of REST APIs. If you go through the REST API documentation of the Google Directions API, you will see that coding is really not involved there. It's mostly about a URL in which you have the REST API calls are mostly about URLs that have base URL, key value pairs of criteria such as origin is this and destination is this and what should be the medium. And there is an authorization key to make the calls and receive the response. And fundamentally, there is no coding required in using the REST APIs. The programmer can embed the constructs of this in any programming language, which they can get from a tool such as Postman. A tool such as Postman will automatically create the coding in a bunch of programming languages required to make this call. And this is another sign that you need not know the programming, need not know how to program to work with REST APIs or REST API documentation. However, this is a little more nuanced than a yes or no answer. Another thing companies do is provide an SDK in addition to REST APIs. In a lot of cases, the same thing that companies allow partner developers to do through the REST APIs are also provided through an SDK, a programming language specific SDK. So SDK and REST APIs basically achieve the same thing. SDKs, of course, are programming language specific. And you can see the various SDKs that Google provides for the cloud. And you can see that they are programming language specific. So if you are documenting the REST APIs and your company or client provides an SDK, software development kit, in addition to the REST APIs, then of course you need to know some coding to be able to document it. You will first of all have to install the SDK, which in many cases will involve pre-installing Node.js or some package manager, so stuff like that you will have to do. But SDK is somewhat beyond the discussion here, so let's not go very deep into it. It's okay if you don't code, but coding is not that difficult. Now, most of us who are afraid of coding would have tried to learn coding, uh, would have tried to learn C++ or Java in college or after that, when they thought maybe they can try programming. And Java and C++ scared the shit out of us because these languages are overly complex and quite verbose. So I like to use a lot of gym analogies. So there are a lot of gym instructors who, more than helping people exercise, they what they really do is scare people away from the gym. A new person goes to the gym for the first day, they make them work out so hard, everything is paining, and that person that night decides, okay, even if I've paid a quarterly or yearly fees, this is really not for me. I can't have this pain. Uh, but what we really need to do is we need to ease people into something. For an instructor, the job is not just about passing on the info. The job is actually to help someone get started, to make them feel that they can do something easily. And from there on, they can pick up and become a specialist. But there's no point making somebody a Java or C# programmer, C++ programmer in the beginning. So we should really move beyond our fear of Java and C++. We should move beyond the traumatic experience we had in a class trying to learn these two. Because programming languages today can be much more easy, much more precise and concise, and can be picked up with far less effort. Programming languages such as Python, which is also the most used programming language in the world, is quite powerful. It can help us do a lot of stuff. So what you can really do is uh, take time, sit in a room, log into a computer, and try out a basic programming course in Python for a couple of hours. And you will find that it's not really that difficult. And what you really need to do to even to document APIs, not just REST API, is you just need to understand the code, read the code. Not really, you really don't need to create applications or write code. You just need to understand how code works, what a piece of code is trying to achieve. And that is enough in most cases. So this is a course that I really like. I think it's really suitable for a person who is trying to start programming. A course by Anise Davis. I really like it. It's a little over 2 hours. Yeah, 2 hours for 14 minutes, and it becomes like 1 hour if you play it at double the speed, which works in most cases. So it starts with the fundamentals of programming, and it eases you into what you can achieve with Python. And then by the end, they have some very good examples, hands-on examples that you can use in daily life. So I really would like somebody to get started with this. If you are to start with programming, to understand programming, uh, if you go through this course, it will really help you overcome your fear of programming, which was induced by a Java or C++ learning session. So coding is not difficult, and all we need to do is to understand or read code, not really program ourselves. So coding is simple, as we discussed, but it's not like there are no other challenges in trying to do REST API documentation. The authentication part, which is part of most, all APIs, all REST APIs, is the most complex that I've found getting started. So you as a technical writer, based on the last slide, might think that for REST APIs, you don't need to know coding and it's an easy skill to acquire, but there are challenges. There is stuff like OAuth, OpenID Connect, which really needs to be mastered. It may not be programming, but it needs to be understood, and it's not really very straightforward. It'll need some effort to understand. And since this is the gateway to REST APIs, there is no workaround. Uh, you will have to learn it. If you are the sole technical writer working on these docs in a medium-sized or small company. In a big company, maybe you won't be doing very challenging work even if you are doing REST APIs. We'll discuss this in a later slide. But there are other things in REST API documentation that you need to understand, which can be more difficult than the primary fear that you have of coding. So overall, you need to be able to work your way through difficulties when things are not working, when authentication is not working, when you're making a call, but it's not returning the response that you need. You'll have to work hard. You'll have to troubleshoot. You'll have to Google. You have to understand what is it that's not going right, because you need to explain it to the end user. And like I mentioned, not all REST API doc writers are equal. In an established company, I've seen a lot of tech writers would just be grammatically checking the descriptions of various methods, various REST API calls that the programmer needs to make, the partner programmer needs to make. So we don't really need to understand how the REST APIs work. We just run a spell check sometimes. A lot of tech writers do that. But in a smaller company, you could actually be getting into the design of the APIs and editing the stuff there. So this is the Swagger editor. This is the pet store API. Let's open another sample that we have created. So this right here is the design of the REST APIs as well as the description. So this forms the core of the documentation as well as the design of the REST APIs of a company. And this is what the Outlook would look like. When we host it on a Swagger UI instance, only this part will be visible. This won't be. But this is the environment a REST API technical could be working in. And they would be enhancing the description of different parameters, the request and response, the what would be the errors that somebody will be encountering. So this right here is the design, the documentation, and also what we call docs as code, where code and doc are not separate. But a lot of us will not be getting into the YAML of the REST API's design. This could also be JSON sometimes, because this is very lightweight. Sometimes the format this is saved in JSON. JSON, both are supported. And in a medium-sized company, you could be partnering with developers, product managers, and developer relations to create excellent use cases to showcase a company's REST APIs in actual business domain, giving them examples with fake names like John Doe was John Doe, the programmer wants to do this in this company, ABC or Acme Inc. And this is how he will go around doing it. And giving out use cases, actual use cases to your end users, the partner programmers. Uh, so you could be just doing the grammar check, in which case you need not know anything about the REST APIs, and it suffices. And you could be getting into the code, or you could be a level 3 REST API technical writer, as per this slide, who is actually partnering with product management to help adoption of the features by creating REST API use cases. And that's where the magic happens. And that's where you will have a lot of companies clamoring to recruit you. But again, we just need to be able to read the code, to visualize what could be the use cases, to understand what is happening. We don't need to write the code. In fact, the ability to write the code comes with its own issues. What issues? The issues because of which we are in the business. A seasoned programmer has no patience to explain anything, right? Coding skills come with a loss of patience to explain things. Even the developer who is looking for documentation when they're, building REST API integration with another company, they themselves will not even write a little readme.md in GitHub about the code they write. And I've seen this is true about most programmers. And that's why you need technical writers who are not specialist programmers. They can just read the code to do what the programmers cannot do, which is explain somebody patiently what they have built and what can be done with it. In fact, most of the programmers don't even bother about how their code can be used in the real world. So we are in business. So things you need to learn to do REST API documentation. I'll have another session about this in which we will learn what is the workflow of entire REST API development and REST docs. The programmer, the technical writer, and partner developer, how they all fit in. What do we do with Postman? How we make money by lending for cloud functionality. But this is beyond the scope of this session. We'll have another session in which we'll have hands-on look at each of these parts. What is YAML? What is JSON? What is request and response? How do we do it? About REST API documentation, the things you need to understand to do REST API documentation, such as why we need REST APIs, how developers develop them, how partners, developers, subscribers access and use them. So this will be another detailed session. What you need to learn is, in addition to code, in fact, code is a very small part of it. You need to have theoretical understanding to be able to work with it. So this is the conclusion. Don't assume that the REST API space or REST API documentation space is all evolved. It is still in a nascent stage. People are still trying to figure out stuff. Uh, when you try to understand REST APIs and REST API documentation, you may have doubts, you may have issues. Note them down, because most of these issues will be valid even for partner programmers. So partner programmers are actually struggling to adopt to companies' REST APIs by different vendors. This is causing a lot of friction between the seller and buyer of cloud functionality. They're trying to figure out the best way to help people adopt their technology. Uh, a lot of times companies edit their REST APIs in a way that it breaks the integration made by different clients. So it is a space with a lot of churn, a lot of chaos, and they can use a lot of help, non-programmer help, to understand how best they can do stuff. So don't be shy, go for it, be prepared. You will get opportunity to work on REST APIs. You cannot avoid it. It will come for you. Uh, and if you're ready, you'll be able to get some really good assignments within your company. And for further learning, invite technical writers like yourself to like and subscribe to the Content Gym newsletter, which is an 800 strong community almost. So that's it for today. You guys, good luck.